per year. Okay.
SCD Iowa, 2621, we're down 21.
So we're going to wrap up the meeting here. Dan Ringwald back up at AI, Vacant land, and solar, saving some money, okay? So this whole thing on AI is driving a lot of people crazy. People lose their jobs, and it's like, I hate this stuff, but at the same time, you have a business and you want to decrease your expenses and your work and everything else, there are some advantages of using AI. The fact is, there's no running away from it and hiding, because it's just going to keep coming on strong with the robots and everything else. I think if you saw Terminator at one of the movies at the end, they said, come on, the robots are coming, we got to get out of town. Well, they're coming. It's all happening. Stop paying for consulting. Okay, when you're looking at AI, realizing what it has to offer, you can stop paying for consulting, stop asking for tech support, stop asking for sales support, and businesses, at least in my opinion, should all use AI as their first line of support for people, because when you call up and you're like on hold and people are saying, well, I don't know, they're giving you half bits of information, if you're not using AI, and it's so easy to use it, to ask questions, that's a good place to start. And if all else fails from that point on, then call up and ask for a human. I've got on all my websites that say, start with AI. If that fails, then knock on my door. I'm happy to consult with you. I do everything I can to automate the business. So this portion of it goes back to Santa Barbara Computing, which is my business as well, to help you automate your business and help your marketing move forward and give you, whatever it is that you feel that you need in steps, a little bit at a time. I've got an automated phone system, which this doesn't work for everybody, but it certainly works for me. It automates everything coming in, and I've got the first message that says, if you don't want to hear anything, just press 1 and leave a message for Dan. I never answer my business phone, which again, a lot of people go, geez, I'd lose my business if I did that. Well, the kind of business that I do works for me to do that. It may not work for a lot of other people, but if they're not serious, really wanted to talk to me other than, hey, I want to sell you some shoes, I want to sell you this, I want to scam you for that, I just want to whatever. There's a lot of scamming. 8 out of the 10 calls that I get are probably hang-ups. And I do say, sorry we missed your call, here's a website, here's the information, get back, ask your questions. Very few people get back. They're just automated, sellers doing different things, just trying to get your time. I'm just not going to spend the time there. So, don't click on anything suspicious. Contact companies directly. There's some good stuff, but it's going to take time. Like I said earlier, when people are on AI and asking if I should jump from this 19th floor, and will I be okay? The AI says, yeah, you'll be fine. You've heard it. It's happening. And so we've got some time before this improves. Vacant land. After doing a lot of real estate nationwide and dealing with rehabs and tenants and all that kind of stuff, and the government coming out and saying, hey, we're going to let people live there for free, you can't take it to court. I said, I've only got 20 properties nationwide. It's not that much. I'm just going to sell them and get rid of it and quit doing that. And I'm going to stick with vacant land because, like Ken, who was doing the tax stuff, said, he's gone all through that. And yeah, he still is rehabbing some of these properties that he's picking up. He's getting such a good deal. It was interesting when I asked him, do you do just lots, or are you doing more remote properties? And he said, I'm not doing remote properties at all. I really don't know about remote properties, but I can tell you what I've learned. And there's a bunch of people out there to teach you this. During the pandemic, a lot of people got to work at home. When they first started working at home and the company said, get out of here, you just need to go do this from home, they realized, wow, I can move someplace, I can move more remote. Well, the whole concept of having properties remotely and working remote has really caught on, and even after the pandemic, and they're calling people back to work, there's a lot of people going, I've already figured out how to make money. I'm not going back to that job, and I'm not going back in the middle of that city. So one of the things that I really specialize in is looking for properties that are about 5 miles to 30 miles from any major city or a city big enough that it's got Home Depot, Walmart, whatever. And the reason for that is if you're about 5 miles out, you're probably not in the city, you're in the county. And once you get in the county, there's less restrictions. When you start looking for properties, the first thing you want to ask AI is, what are the restrictions in this county? And if they say it's heavily restricted, you might think twice about buying property in those areas. If they say there's very little restrictions, then you've got commercial, you've got residential, you've got trailers, you've got RVs, you've got all kinds of things that you can put on that property without having to rush in there and start building, okay? Owner occupants. What we do with owner occupants is say, hey, look, we've got a property for sale, and when I get the properties, it's usually 2 to 5 acres, and it's no more than 30 miles, because if you want to generate income from those properties, then you are not going to get people to go back into town to work if they've got to drive 2 hours. That's just way too far, okay? So owner occupants, I'm telling them, hey, $1,000 down. And when they say, well, how much is it or what's going on, my first question to them is, well, the place we need to start is, what do you feel comfortable paying per month? If they say 500, then I say, great, I think we can work this out. I don't buy the properties with my money, I work with joint venture investors. And we're looking at properties kind of like Linda did on the probate. And right now I'm starting off with, lesser expensive properties, $5,000 to $10,000. A lot of people who do this won't touch anything under $30,000. They'll go from $30,000 to $1 million. Okay? I'm not there right now, and one of the reasons is getting investors to come up with a whole lot of money down to buy it is a little tricky. But if it's in that range, I can usually go to a realtor and say, here's my offer, and get a decent deal, not the kind that Ken's getting on tax liens or maybe probate, but a decent deal, because you can multiply the price of those properties by 3 times. A lot of them that are bought for $6,000 are being sold for close to $30,000, and nobody ever says, what's the price of the property, or can I talk you down on it? When I say how much can you afford, what feels comfortable for you to pay, if they say $450, $500, and I say, yeah, that works. I mean, I've had people say, I'll pay you $1,000 a month, and I say, no, I don't want $1,000, because if you renege, you don't get the deed until you make your last payment. If you get through 2 or 3 years of payments, and you don't make your payment, it's all going through escrow, it's all going through a collection company. They're the ones that are going to say, well, you've missed 3 payments, we're just going to shut you down and kick you out. We don't have to foreclose because you don't have the deed. I don't want you to fail, I want you to win. So if you want to pay $1,000, why don't you do that once in a while, but let's stick with something like $500 or $450 that you could afford, and then whenever you feel you can pay more, pay it. But I don't want you stuck having to pay it when you can. And they're like, oh, okay. How much for the interest rate, they say. And they say, well, I could pay like 8 or 10 or 12%. And I say, how about 5? Well, why would you do 5? Because I want you to win. I want this thing to work. Well, how much down? $1,000 down. So I make it really easy for them to get into these properties. I sold 30 acres in New Mexico that I had for years, and I finally, got back. We had Jack Bosch come and speak to us like 15 years ago. I've got videos up on the Santa Barbara Radio, which, by the way, everything we do on all meetings, 100% is recorded and goes up to YouTube. You don't have to worry a whole lot about taking notes and whatnot, because it's all there. And so I got back with Jack Bosch recently, and I was looking at these videos, and I went, wow, that was the young Jack Bosch. That was 15 years ago. He's doing great, but it really gave me, a sense of what was going on. on that 30 acres in New Mexico, one of their coaches that I was working with said, well, Dan, you can't sell it for that much. You're trying to sell it for too much. It's never gonna happen. I sold it for $30,000, just like I told him, because the person was more concerned with what he could pay per month and not how long it was gonna take to pay it off or how much he was gonna pay. Never once asked to decrease the price, and it's usually 5 years. If we need to get that 450, 500, whatever it is in there, in a range that would work for them, I can go 5, I can go 6, 5.5, whatever. We can change that payoff time to fit that monthly payment. And they're just like, well, I got exactly what I wanted. They just really don't care that much about the price. Unless it's really out of control. JVP, that's the passive income. If you're working with me, the first thing you have to realize is that it may take longer on some properties to sell. The properties that he was talking about, Ken, were lots next to homes that sold quickly, he got them really inexpensively. The things that are out a little bit more remote could take a little bit longer. But when they put the money down and they've only put down $5,000, it's kind of like, I'm already the owner. I don't really care how long it takes to sell. Just get it sold, and then we split the profits over a 5-year period. And, you know, they seem to be happy with that at that lower price range. I've got an example of a California property, New Mexico property, just to give you an idea how much information ends up going on these properties when I've got them listed. This is the one in New Mexico. And the first thing I did was talk to a realtor when I bought it. He goes, well, it's a little bit far out of town. I said, like, how far? He said, well, maybe 10 miles. I said, that's not far in my world. You know, 30 miles would be far. I said, what is it like as far as restrictions? And this is in Socorro, New Mexico, which is just below Albuquerque. He said it's one of the least restricted counties in New Mexico. That means commercial, that means residential, that means farming, whatever. There's a whole bunch of information on here about, you know, leasing to solar companies. I got this thing from New Mexico as an example and said, hey, here's an RV park. You could build something like that on this if you're a buyer, but you could start off a lot slower and a lot less expensive if you do something like this, where you're just building some sheds for some people, because people typically want, what they say is there water? Is there sewage? Is there electricity? Well, one of the things that I do with solar is get people to understand, yeah, there's electricity, it's yours. Nobody wants to go with the utility companies. They want to get out of the utility companies. They want to be off-grid. So, you know, I'm there to help them with that too. So that whole thing about solar and vacant land, to me, you know, it works really well, and I feel really good about trying to get people to build their dreams and make this how they want it. One of the first things I say is that a lot of these things might be in higher fire areas. The last thing you want to do is go build a 5,000 square foot home that's going to cost you $10,000, $12,000, $15,000 a year with Fair Plan or some other ridiculous insurance rate. If you start off small, you might decide to stay small unless you have kids. It's just your thing. It's trying to do something at a pace that you enjoy living and working your dream. I heard something recently about solar, and if you were to go off grid and just tell the solar or the electric company, hey, you can take your meter back and you can have it. The law is you cannot live in a house that doesn't have an electric meter, because now you are in a property that's uninhabitable. And once it's uninhabitable, the lender has a right to recall the loan and take the property back away from you, whether you like it or not. I mean, is that crazy, just to try to get off? But if you had something simple and you didn't have a mortgage, or the house you have or you buy into is paid off, well, you don't have to at least worry about the mortgage company pulling your house back, but you probably will still have to worry about some regulation where they say, no, you can't do that. Well, you know, you can leave it hooked up, you just don't use it that much. Okay, so that's another answer to that. The other thing that I do, This is vacant land, it's 5 acres, and this is, this actually is the 5 acres. And so what I've done was I put a fake house there, and I've divided this up for RV rental income. You know, first thing people say, well, how can you get passive income on vacant land? That's crazy. If you own it, and you own or finance it, you're getting income, okay? It's basically passive from the standpoint that you're not gonna have to fix up any homes, you're not gonna have to put any rehabbing or anything into it. So from that standpoint, it's pretty passive. But the idea here is not to really turn it into a trailer park unless you want to. You could, you know, because there's the ability to do that. And although this looks small, these are about 0.2 acres. And 0.2 acres is a lot of space for people who aren't in a trailer park. If you're in a trailer park, you're not getting 0.2 acres. You're getting 0.2 feet or something. You know, you're right next to, hey, please pass the whatever, you know.
Great point.
There you go. And so the idea really is advertising rental space in the beginning and telling people, hey, if you want to come out here and live in this thing, it'd probably be a good idea to rent it for a couple of months so you know for a fact that you like this property and you want to buy it. It's going to work for you. It's a nice area somehow. But the other thing is if you get 2 or 3 renters in there and they're kind of looking at each other like, oh, you rent? And you rent? And it's for sale? You mean you could end up being my landlord? Yeah. Maybe I should buy it and you could be my tenant. So it creates a little bit of competition for people who are getting in there to go, I think I need to get moving on this and do something before I end up in a situation that I'm just going to end up having to be forced out of here because somebody else owns it. And it's all month to month. I would never do a long-term lease like a year. That way when somebody comes in, they can say, hey, you got 2 renters on this place. I don't want them at all. I want them gone. Well, you just give them 30-day notice. They're month to month. The other thing is they do not own this property, any of the vacant land that we do, and that's why I asked Ken, are you giving them the deed? And he said, yeah, he's giving them the deed. We don't give them the deed. It's a 5-year term. I think his are probably quicker because he mentioned a shorter term. But if they fail to make the payment at the 3rd year or whatever year, they're out. And I'm not the collector. I want it to go through escrow. I want them to feel like they're served. It's legal. This is not a scam. And I want a collection agency getting the money because it costs me like maybe $20 or less for them to collect and send me the money. But they also have the attorneys that if they don't make the payment and we have to move to the next step, you know, we've got an attorney lined up to get in there that knows the area, knows what to do, and they just serve the notice and they have to go. That's it. There's no money back. There's nothing. So when they get in there and they start making the payments, they don't want to back out. You know, it's really pretty good from that standpoint. Tiny homes. Cost of tiny homes. There's a big list of information on that about tiny homes and the cost of tiny homes. You know, you kind of need to know what to get into. Yes, you could make these a lot more income if you were to put tiny homes, trailers, whatever, on these properties and provide them sewage, provide them water, provide them, you know, power. But then you're going to have more responsibility. One of the things that I thought about recently is if you've got somebody that you're not quite sure of, it might be easier just, especially in Los Angeles where it's all tenant friendly, is just tell them, hey, if you're thinking about it, why don't you just go out there and spend the night, spend a couple nights, free, be my guest. No paperwork, nothing. And then all of a sudden if you find out these people aren't leaving, they're squatting, you know what the Sacramento, Los Angeles, everybody does with all these homeless people, these RVs and things? They have an officer come and ticket the vehicle, illegal parking. And after so many tickets and the money goes up, then eventually they go, okay, here's your notice, we're going to have it towed away. When it gets towed away, it could be as much as 1,500 or 800 just to get that thing back out from the impound. And then the people are like, well, I'd rather go homeless than pay that. So if you start off by telling somebody, yeah, just go out there and park, whatever, it's going to be a lot easier to get rid of them than to serve them a notice for 30 days and go through that if it gets more difficult. A lot of people, if they want to buy it, just go, I just want to buy it. I don't want any renters, I don't want anything, I just want to buy it, let's move on. So that's another option for you. Kokomo? You've heard the song? The whole idea is to find some place that you just think this would be wonderful. And it might be wonderful for 5 years, and then you decide to move, it doesn't matter. But you're building on your dream slowly at your pace that you want to build on it and make something happen. I live on 7 acres on top of West Camino Cielo in Santa Barbara, and we've been there for 30 years, and there was no house, it was just vacant. In fact, I was in a trailer park. We had 3 rentals. I was in a trailer park with my wife's mother's trailer, and she was there, and there was a lady that did the landmark case in California for taking people's trailers away from them and then reselling them at some ungodly amount or renting them out or whatever. And I went out there and I gave her, you know, a ration, and she immediately evicted me, my wife, and our 2 kids. And it was so funny because I went to court. I didn't go to court. I went to talk to an attorney, and I said, this is what's going on. He goes, she's the landmark person in Santa Barbara that set the law for all of California. If you sue her and you win, what are you going to get? The opportunity to live there? Is that what you want? And I looked at him and I said, I knew there was a good reason coming here and talking to you. You just woke me up. Hell no, I don't want to live there. So we immediately got a trailer, put the kids in a little motel. My son's like, when can we go home? We can't. We didn't tell them this, but we were homeless. We had 3 rental properties in Santa Barbara. So in any case, I really love getting up on the property, being in a small trailer, and feeling like we're free. We got out of this mess, and we can do whatever we want. And it took, you know, time to get where we are now, but it's just a really good experience to locate something that you love and work on it at a pace that doesn't get unaffordable for you. Okay? Is anybody happy with their utility bill? Personal Power Project, another website I've got and company, and all these different companies I've got all filtered back to NHBIG, which stands for National Home Buyers Investors Group, which is California C Corp. So the money flows in there, the business flows in there. This is just another one. And California is 30 cents per kilowatt. Between 4 and 9 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the afternoon and 9 o'clock is that time of use where it goes to 60 cents per kilowatt. So if you're charging your electric car during that period of time, it's probably costing you as much or more than going downtown and charging. And what's happening right now is a lot of people got pushed off of net metering 2 and got pushed into net metering 3, which means before, if you, the utility company, gave me an hour, but I gave you back an hour from my solar, we broke even. That's one way to spin your meter back. When you get forced into going to net metering 3, which is now what they have, and they give you an hour and you want to give them back an hour, they give you like 0.052% or something stupid for your, you know, energy back to them. So people are getting to the point where they're saying, well, that's gone. Is it even worth investing in solar at all to save some money? If you get batteries in your house and you don't give anything back to them, then yes, it is, because you're saving that energy for yourself. You're not giving it back to anybody else. So a lot of people are really just like, you know, stocking up on all these expensive batteries that are $2,000 a piece and saying, hey, you can have 10, 15, or 25 of these things. Tesla batteries are about $15,000. Now I've got 3 Tesla batteries at my house right now and Tesla solar. And I got those Tesla batteries free because they had a program for about 6 months, about 2 or 3 years back, and said, if you're in a high power area, you have a well, and you have your power going out all the time, which we had it going out twice a week. You know, Santa Barbara's got a lot, and there's going to be more problems out there with power going out. Then you qualify to get these things free. And I had started with them, but it wasn't like that. And I just got a discount, $1,000 or whatever. And then when it came out free, I called them up and I said, "You're giving these things away free now?" And they said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, I don't want one." And I said, "Well, you're already supposed to get one installed in about 2 weeks." And I said, "Yeah, well, I don't want it." And they said, "Well, you'd have to cancel everything. Why don't you want it?" I said, "Because I want 3. He goes, "Well, you gonna get greedy on us now?" I said, "Of course I'm gonna get greedy, you know. If they're free, why not?" 15,000 each, that was $40,000 worth of batteries from Tesla. So, okay, I qualified, we got them in, but here's the joke. $40,000 worth of batteries. If you go out and start stocking up on batteries so that you can, you know, deal with your house, deal with your car, all that, we're just a few, maybe a year away from bidirectional charging. And why spend $40,000 on batteries when you could spend $40,000 on a car, or lease the car, even better, especially if you're in a C Corp like we are, that you could write the whole thing off. You know, all this tracking you have to do for your business, that's usually an S Corp. When you're in a C Corp, you don't track anything. You just give them the bill at the end of the year to your accountant and say, "Hey, write the whole lease off for the year, each year." But imagine, for the price that you would pay for these batteries, you could have the batteries in your car, drive around town, and when you get home, plug that car in your house, and you got a power problem, boom. You got that house going for a week. Or you just want to try to make sure you're not using power from them during that 4 to 9. You've got something else you can use. So you really need to start taking a look at, what are we going to do for our next car? How, you know, there's a Ford F-150, there's a Chevy Silverado. Those both have 220 output, and they're both bidirectional charging. I talked to Chevy and also asked AI, and again, ask all your stuff to AI because you're going to get an answer really quick. What's the price to go bidirectional with a Chevy Silverado? It's $6,000 for the equipment, $5,000 for the equipment, and $6,000 for labor to install it. And I got back to AI and I said, "That's $11,000. I think I could do better just by getting some more solar panels and my own little batteries and forget about the bidirectional charging." And I said, yeah, you could. I said, "But wait a minute. What if I use that 220 plug on the back of the truck where they're going out to the construction sites and being able to plug into the homes where they're doing the rehabs? And I plug that in instead of getting all that equipment." And AI came back and said, "Well, that's a really good idea, and you can do that basically free because it's already in the back of the truck. You're just not going to get as much power as quick if you have bidirectional." And my point was, well, what do I care? As long as it's taking the major circuits of my house and doing what I need to do, who cares? And it's like, yeah, as long as it serves the purpose, why spend all that money? Now what will happen is those prices will come down as we go more into technology, just like computers came down. But I wouldn't be running out paying that high price today for the few cars that do bidirectional charging. And they're all going to be that in the future. In fact, I think Australia passed a law and said, "China, you can sell cars in Australia as long as they'll do bidirectional charging, or we're not going to accept them in our country." Now, are they still doing that? I don't know. But here's the thing. When you look at going solar, a lot of people really just want a backup battery to start with, okay? That's really all they want. So they don't have to deal with gas, propane, the noise, the exhaust, all that. So if you just started with a battery that will also take solar, you can do the solar later on. And if you are living in a tract home, it's pretty difficult to put things in your yard because there's not enough space. But if you've got a patio, if you've got a carport, I just bought 2 solar panels recently for our system at home, which from EcoFlow will go through and pick out certain circuits in your house and the important ones, and you can program it all up with your cell phone, and you say, hey, if the power goes off, I want priority here, middle here, nothing here, shut that down, I don't care about that. And so there's ways of dealing with that, and the solar panel was 500 watts for $400. And you could get Chinese things for probably $125. Whether they'll last, or they'll be good, or you'll have problems, I don't know. So there's a lot of different things that you can choose from, but the idea is to start small, just like the vacant land. Start small, just get the backup battery,